Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast, the show that brings you latest insights, thought leadership, and stories from across the global mining industry. In this episode, we have Andrew Hume, who's the managing director of Thor Energy, a company operating at the crossroads of critical minerals exploration, natural hydrogen, and evolving energy transition. We spoke last April 2025, and Thor has continued to advance its portfolio at the intersection of critical minerals and natural hydrogen. In this episode, we're going to discuss Andrew's journey from the oil and gas industry into mining, the progress of Thor's flagship HY range project, the growing potential of natural hydrogen, and the company's combination of mining, energy exploration, and AI-driven technologies to unlock new opportunities. And also, lastly, Andrew's going to share his thoughts on leadership, innovation, and the lessons he's learned sort of throughout his career. So, Andrew, great to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
Great to see you again, Rob. Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful to see you.
Great. For those that didn't listen to the previous episode, which was just over a year ago, obviously do encourage you to go back and listen to that episode after obviously listening to this. But for those that didn't listen to that episode, I just wondering, you just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background. Obviously, I mentioned that you were previously in the oil and gas space, and you've obviously come into the mining space. And just run us through your career from early in the days to the present day.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a petroleum guy by background. I did my first degree at St Andrews up in Scotland, geology degree, a long time ago now. And I've been quite lucky to have a very international career. Worked for Shell, Total Energies, Maersk, Murphy. Lived in the USA, Australia, Denmark, and the UK, of course, and worked on projects, around the world. So, been very fortunate. My career has been mostly associated with exploration, but also with development and appraisal and production, obviously, of oil and gas, both offshore and onshore. So it's been a bit of a global kind of career, very enjoyable. And then I suppose over the last few years, I've been, obviously you progress through your career, take on management, leadership roles, and I've been involved in a variety of roles. Most recently with Total Energies in Scotland, and I left there about almost 2 years ago now, and returned to Australia. So that's been my background. And then obviously, the question, I think we discussed this, 15, 16 months ago, Rob. Why the change, and what's the motivation behind moving to Thor and a junior minerals company. And for me, it was a bit of a no-brainer. It was over my career, I'd been taking on different responsibilities, getting a little bit more focused on multi-energy strategies, a little bit more onto the sort of the I suppose the more environmentally friendly side of things, and then the opportunity when I first started talking to Thor about 18 months ago now. Thor was transitioning from a more conventional mining company, been around for about 20 years, who really wanted to focus more on the natural hydrogen helium space and more on sustainable critical minerals. So for me, my passions, my desire to take the reins and to combine that with Thor's desire to make this big strategic shift was a really compelling sort of opportunity. So yeah, that's my background.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your career. And obviously, I suppose what motivated you to leave obviously a major energy company environment to join Thor, obviously a junior clean energy and critical minerals exploration company, which is obviously a slight pivot from oil and gas experience. And from that, what has sort of been your biggest challenges coming into the mining industry?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I think that I'd spent I've spent 20 plus years. I won't say how many years, or I'll say too old, but 20 plus years working in big companies, massive multinationals, Shell, Total Energies, Maersk, all employ 100,000 people. So they're huge. it gives you great exposure to the latest technology, I guess the cutting edge ways of working. And I've been very fortunate in my career. But it's different working for these massive corporations and actually being in a smaller entity where I feel like you can make more substantial change, if that makes sense. Um, Take greater greater ownership and have greater potential, to push projects forward. And with Thor, was that opportunity to come in and try and transform the company from as I say, a company that's been around 20 years, being focused on quite a wide variety of different minerals in the US, particularly in Australia. Tried to focus that portfolio, gain value and funds from divesting some of the high value non-core assets, and at the same time bring in a big portfolio that relates to the hydrogen and helium side of things. So for me, that was a compelling personal motivation. I also think that you know the oil and gas industry knows how to do oil and gas really well. The mining industry across a big smorgasbord knows how to do things really well. But what we're looking at, particularly in Thor, is some of the commodities that sort of sit in between. You mentioned the intersection. I think that's a nice word, sort of the intersection of oil and gas exploration, conventional mineral exploration, and equally for development and production, that sit in between. Um, Natural hydrogen, helium, it's a gas, it's a fluid in the subsurface, has a lot akin to natural gas, so we can learn a lot from that. But we're also working in very old rocks, very hard rocks, which are normally associated with metals extraction as well. So, by kind of getting the best of both, by combining resources, by combining mindsets, we have that opportunity, I think, to make something a little bit different. So, those things were really the factors that compelled me to make the move.
Yeah.
And in terms of challenge, I think a lot of your viewers will have probably gone through similar challenges. When you work for massive companies, you have what feels like infinite resources: lawyers, HR, accountants, tax, modelers, technical experts, you name it. They're all there and available. And when you work at a smaller company, you don't have that luxury. But also, that's liberating. It means you can be more creative personally. But in terms of the smaller staff numbers, you can be really a lot more innovative. We can go and use contractors and things like that do bring out that specialist knowledge when we need it. So, in that way, it's quite liberating. But I suppose it's a challenge. It's just a lot of late nights. It's a lot of stretching my personal capabilities, learning more about the legal aspect, the governance aspects, whatever it might be. So maybe time management's the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Obviously, we spoke about the intersection of obviously traditional mining and oil and gas industry. I wonder if you just tell us more about Thor's focus and unique value proposition.
Yeah, I mean, it stems to that again. It comes back to that word intersection. I think we're trying to do something which maybe isn't 100% unique, but it's very much pushing the margins about, as again, exploiting the best techniques, and ways of working, processes from the oil and gas and from mining. We're focused on hydrogen and helium, which is really a burgeoning new sector, still a little bit below most people's radars. And we also, we have sort of two main aspects to Thor: the natural hydrogen, helium, and also the critical minerals through in situ recovery and such processes. So we've developed I think what is a unique portfolio, and applying techniques to sort of liberate the value out of that. I think that's unique. Our position is now not entirely, but largely focused on South Australia. So we get lots of synergies between the different commodity types. Allows us to integrate the data, lots of different data types in a relatively, well, still a large area, but a relatively small geographic area, to really kind of bring value that we are learning from looking at one commodity type to the other. So collectively, that brings us, I think, a relatively unique value proposition. Yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Mining International. In today's market, finding the right mining talent isn't easy. Mining International works closely with mining companies to identify and secure senior and technical professionals through a tailored search approach. If you're hiring or exploring your options, you can contact Rob Tyson via the show notes to start a conversation today.
It would be good to get an update on Thor Energy and obviously the projects and how they've developed. Obviously specifically with the HY Range project, obviously which is your flagship project.
Yeah.
And what are the next steps? And I wonder if you can just give us obviously a time frame around that for the next
Yeah.
I suppose time frame around that project over the next sort of 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, sure. So the HY range or high range project, it's we use that term because it's a little bit simpler. High range is a little bit easier to say than RSEL 802, which is its full license name. So I'm lucky. We've got a really excellent portfolio. We have a license that sits immediately north of the city of Adelaide in South Australia, extends about 200, 300 kilometers. It's a huge block, several thousand square kilometers. So this isn't a typical mining lease size. It's, a couple of orders of magnitude, maybe bigger than we're used to. Gives us huge scope to look for, in this case, natural hydrogen and helium. So we picked up this license as part of a deal we did, which we finished in February 2025, about 18 months ago now. A large portfolio of hydrogen, helium, also some gas storage exploration licenses, which are a sort of a secondary concern, if you like, for Thor. And the high range license is the priority. We think it's in an excellent place geographically for a whole number of reasons why I won't go into here, but in short, to say that we know the source rocks are there. We've got a nice sort of more oil and gas friendly sedimentary sequence as well, overriding that. So we've got a lot of the elements that you might associate more with sort of traditional oil and gas, but coupled with the hard rock, hydrogen and helium generating geology beneath there. So the main activities we've done a lot of shallow geochemical evaluation. Surface down to a few meters below the ground. Split that up into two main phases. One that was done mid last year, pretty much a year ago, and another one we've literally just concluded a couple of months ago. We had a press release about 2 weeks ago announcing some of the findings, and the headline figure is that in one location we find 3% natural hydrogen in the soil, which is that's essentially hydrogen that's coming out under low pressure conditions out of the ground. And it really gives us a lot of hope, and it really speaks and as a soft clue to the potential volumes and hydrogen percentages that we hope to find when we go down, say a kilometer into the subsurface. So that's the latest news. And not only have we found that high reading in one location, but across, let's say two really good focus areas, we're finding percentage levels or many thousands of parts per million enrichment in hydrogen and in other places helium as well. So we're really confident. It gives us that real smoking gun, if you like, that we're in the right place. The next thing we're going to do, in fact, there was a release this morning. We announced to the markets that we've just signed a letter of award with Velsize, who are one of the principal Australian seismic companies. We're going to go probably end of Q3, start of Q4 this year. We'll be out in the field for 3 or 4 weeks acquiring 2D seismic. So this involves, for some of your listeners that aren't necessarily familiar with seismic, it involves making an acoustic sound, a noise that you generate into the ground. That noise propagates into the subsurface and hits off layers of geology and faults and other subsurface features. And then we use a string of they're like microphones, we call them geophones, but these record the signal as they return to the surface. Can process all that up and get a really nice image of the subsurface down to several kilometers. What we're going to do with that is we've obviously got a well-established desktop analysis of all the gravity and magnetics and other data sets that we have. This seismic will help us ground truth, so we know the depth to the basement, what's the nature of the basement? Where are main faults coming through? Are there structures and focusing mechanisms for the hydrogen and the helium in the subsurface? And from that, of course, the next step is to go and drill. So once we get the seismic onto the workstations, integrate the data, we're already preliminarily planning. We'll accelerate the planning and hopefully be drilling a couple of wells as early as next year. So that's the next 12 months or so. So it's really coming to fruition. Yeah.
Natural hydrogen seems to be gaining more attention recently. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about what particularly motivates you about obviously natural hydrogen's potential, but also what does the global industry look like, and where can it be used on a day-to-day basis? And I suppose lastly, also, can it be considered as a next commodity class?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of your last question, that's the hope. I mean, only time will tell. But ourselves, that's notionally, notionally a year away from drilling. There's some other companies out there in other parts of the world that are also chasing this. I think whoever gets to that first success is going to really get this onto not necessarily the front page, but onto people's radars. Let's say that. So I think it is a commodity class that's got a very high chance of being something material. It still carries some risk at this stage, but it really is a burgeoning commodity. But only time will tell. In terms of my own motivation, again, I come from an oil and gas background. As an industry, we've known about hydrogen in the ground for, I don't know, 100 years, at least 100 years. It's never been materially attractive. Until 30, 40 years ago, no one was looking for natural gas. People were after oil. So if you came across hydrogen, it had no value. Even over the last few tens of years, it's had no real value, and it's been a little bit of a geological oddity, if you like, that exploration geologists have known about. It's only recently where there's been an increased interest in hydrogen across the last decade. Most of that interest in hydrogen has been focused on trying to create green hydrogen, which is using wind or solar or some kind of renewable energy source to essentially extract hydrogen by electrolyzing water and some other allied techniques. And I think there's still a lot of potential in that green hydrogen, but the economics haven't quite worked out yet. So hydrogen's come to the fore. That's one of the reasons why the natural hydrogen industry has started to gain momentum. And I think, as I say, we're weeks or months, perhaps as much as a year away from that first big announcement, which hopefully is Thor's announcement, coming from the industry. So a lot of potential. I think that's why a lot of people are starting to really pay more attention to this sector. And uses that there's uses as an energy source, and there's its industrial uses. So at the moment, we've got a number of absolutely essential industrial processes. Refining of oil being one of them, production of ammonia and urea and other fertilizers being another huge global industry, and methanol being another feedstock. When you're refining or when you're making those materials, you need hydrogen as part of the processes. At the moment, well in excess of 99% of that hydrogen comes from fossil fuels, natural gas, coal, a little bit from oil. So it's quite a dirty process, and so in there's a huge demand for replacing some of that dirty hydrogen with clean hydrogen to decarbonize and obviously create cleaner products. So that to me is a huge prize, a big impact on the planet. Can hopefully make Thor lots of money by providing that feedstock. It also has an energy use as well. When you oxidize, when you burn hydrogen, you produce water. So and liberate lots of energy. So we can use this directly as a feedstock into the natural gas supply. It can be put through hydrogen fuel cells to create energy, directly into to make electricity. So the future's wide and expansive for its adoption. One of the reasons we always liked our high range project immediately north of Adelaide is because the access to market is very or relatively easy. We're close to electricity infrastructure. We're close to natural gas supply infrastructure, and then ultimately we also there are some big primary, secondary industries in South Australia that this could provide feedstock to as well. So that's its great promise, I'd say.
On the responsibility of mining companies exploring lower emission solutions, I was speaking to Andy Hattersley from ExxonMobil and Julian Scholes on a recent podcast about the challenges facing mining companies in reducing GHG emissions while meeting productivity demands. ExxonMobil has recently published a white paper, which is included in the show notes, on the subject. So it's clearly an area of obviously significant interest. What suggestions do you have on the practical steps that mining operators can actually take to prioritize lowering emission goals?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the key questions I think we have in the industry at the moment, isn't it? I'll give you Thor's perspective, rather than trying to address the whole, very very wide gamut of things that can be done. But I think the main insights that came from the ExxonMobil paper are very valid. They're sort of describing that structural paradox facing the industry. So ore grades decline, traditional mining must move more earth. It's obviously a lot more energy intensive. Economics are poorer, and so we've got to find a way of allowing us to push forward with reducing emissions whilst also increasing that or maintaining the amount of production. So I don't think there's a single solution, but at Thor we want to contribute in two main ways. Firstly, Thor driving forward to help the energy side of things. Obviously focused on the natural hydrogen. And what we hope to achieve, if you can find natural hydrogen close to mine sites, this allows you to use the hydrogen as an energy source, whether that's in transportation or whether it's more through using the hydrogen to drive electricity or other forms of power requirements. And obviously there's huge advantages. We often, when we believe we're going to find hydrogen, oftentimes quite close to large mining infrastructure as well. So it develops some really good synergies there. So this is what Thor's trying to do, is to really bring these technologies to the fore, really make hydrogen something that's a compelling energy solution for miners. As I say, I mentioned earlier, when you use hydrogen as an energy source, the end product is water. It's the ultimate clean power. Ticking a lot of the green requirements of a lot of modern miners, and also a wonderful energy source. So that's that's our first approach, and I think part of our two arms, and I think it could be a big part of how we decarbonize the industry on a global basis. And the other part, obviously, what Thor's other arm is, we focus on in situ recovery of critical minerals as well. So again, down in South Australia, we're actively working through our own acreage and our large majority, principal shareholding, shall I say? It's not a majority, a large shareholding in Enviro Copper Limited, who are an independent company, to look for in situ recovery of copper and amongst other metals. And again, so what does that do? Traditionally mining, of course, is about moving rock. It's about extracting, crushing, all those very heavy, intensive and environmentally, non-ideal, let's say, that ways of removing minerals from the ground. And what one in situ recovery offers is the ability to use wells that we can sink into the ground, use fluid movements through the rock to actually have a much lower physical and environmental impact on the rocks as well. Hopefully reduce costs where we can as well. And there's obviously, for us, there's the potential to perhaps use both the hydrogen as a fuel source in proximity to where we can also do ISR as well. So that's how we're approaching it. I don't think any company can provide the full gamut of solutions, which are going to be part of each individual mining company, each asset's unique requirements of aiming to maintain production, increase production, lower costs, secure supply chain rather than having to bring diesel in from around the planet. get a hold of their own supply chain and ultimately to reduce emissions. But that's what I would say is Thor's approach to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, during the podcast, you mentioned that you're integrating skills and techniques from both traditional mining and obviously oil and gas exploration. Just wondering if you can just tell us more about your approach and some of the techniques and how you're utilizing AI in your workflows.
Yeah. Look, again, it comes back to that intersection word again. From my background as an oil and gas kind of guy, we're used to working from the bottom up. Used to working from the region, try and think about where sands are being deposited, petroleum source rocks being deposited, and we gradually work our way in to find the sweet spot where we focus all of our money and drill wells. And from a mining point of view, sometimes we work the opposite. We're looking at outcrops at the surface data, gravity magnetics data. So that kind of hourglass approach is where we work, and we try and combine all of those into a play-based exploration approach, which is a well understood, I think derived from Shell and Exxon, probably were the founders of this sort of approach 20, 30 years ago, of integrating, of risking, of understanding the uncertainties in different areas, and over time, providing and applying the right data sets to continuously de-risk and prioritize where you want to drill. So we're bringing those in. We're living that approach in the system, and as I say, it's working really well, bringing those two different mindsets, if you like, and different knowledge sets, even on things like gravity and magnetics, understanding what the different disciplines traditionally get out of the same data set. It's really illuminating. So we're doing all of that. And then the AI side of things, I think probably a lot of people are doing this. Um, we're a small company. We have to use our money wisely. We have to use our resources, including my own, efficiently. And so being able to manage all these huge data sets that we've got, proprietary and open file data sets, bringing all that together so we can manage it, interrogate it, look for patterns, use that to think creatively, the human component, refeed that back in. We're basically augmenting and improving the efficiencies of myself and the rest of the team. So yeah, finding it very valuable. And when we get the new seismic data, we'll continue to see what else we can do to look at the data, again, to look at pattern recognition, to see if there's any rock properties and other information we can extract, which will help us look for hydrogen, helium, and also on the metal side of things as well. Yeah.
And finally, is there anything you'd like to share with us about your career and what drives you, and any lessons that you want to obviously share with our audience?
It's humbling, making me feel old now. I mean, well, in my career, I guess what I would say is I've been very lucky. I've traveled the world. I've worked for four really excellent companies in my life, and then now a fifth one with Thor. So I guess I've always been open to experiences, open to the opportunity to travel, try new projects, move from a geologist as I was 100% initially through more of the business and leadership aspect. So I think that's been something which has served me quite well. And I think that, each person has their personality, but, when you're given opportunities, I recommend everyone to explore, life's too short. Um, and I think, going back to that discussion on AI, we're entering a very interesting time of human existence, and how our jobs going to evolve, and how do we continue to make ourselves and our companies, valid, now and into the uncertain future. And I think, something that I try to do is really, try to be, in a continuous learning mode, whether that's the geoscience, whether that's business, whether that's cyber, whether that's AI, whether that's governance, whatever that might be, constantly trying to keep ahead of the requirements of industry and society. So yeah, keep learning, keep humble, keep learning.
Andrew, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story. Give us an update on Thor Energy, and obviously tell us more about obviously natural hydrogen, and an update on your HY range project. And yeah, if our audience obviously wants to reach out to you, obviously have questions, which they probably will, because obviously as you discussed, natural hydrogen is slowly coming into the mining industry. And probably, like you said, 10 years ago, probably people there wasn't any value added. Now there's obviously a lot of value add to natural hydrogen. So if people have questions, how can they go about doing that? How can they follow you? And obviously Thor Energy, and what social media platform channels are you on?
Yes, I mean, we're on all the usual, X and LinkedIn. And then, go to our website, thorenergyplc.com. You go to the contacts detail. If you've got any questions, anyone wants to reach out, make personal contact, or find out a little bit more about hydrogen or what we're up to, and please feel free to send an email there, and we'll be sure to write back.
Yeah, great. And we'll include those in the show notes to company's episode for easy access. So good luck for the next 6 to 12 months. Hopefully, we're going to hear some more stories about natural hydrogen, and obviously through yourselves, Thor Energy. So good luck for the remainder of the year going into next year. Even though we're still 6 months away from that, it will soon go quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for your time, Rob. Look forward to coming back and give you an update in the future.
Yeah, more than welcome. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, appreciate your continued support, and please keep sharing these episodes, obviously far and wide. We're speaking about natural hydrogen, which is new to our industry. So this is educational. So I would really appreciate you just sharing it to people that you know. Whether they're in any commodity, they don't have to be in any particular commodity, because this is as we've discussed, it is the value is being added to this particular natural hydrogen, and people don't know too much about what natural hydrogen is about. So it's good to share this episode and inform our global mining industry. So thank you again for listening. Appreciate your continued support. And until next time, happy mining.